I canceled my wedding 3 days before the ceremony because my mother told me I had no choice. Everyone thinks it was my decision. They're wrong. I used to believe family always knew best, that love meant listening, that obedience was the same thing as respect. I learned, too late, that family interference doesn't always look like control at first. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it calls itself concern. Sometimes it destroys everything you've been building while insisting it's saving you. On the outside, my life looked perfect. Stable job, long-term relationship, a wedding venue booked a year in advance, linen invitations already delivered, guests flying in from 3 countries. People kept telling me how lucky I was, how proud my mother must be. If only they knew what was happening behind closed doors. My mom had always been involved. She framed it as love, protection, guidance, and for most of my life, I accepted it. I was the good daughter, the one who didn't argue, the one who kept the peace. That dynamic worked until it didn't, until my engagement turned our quiet tension into open relationship drama that no one else could see yet. It didn't start with yelling or threats. It started with questions. Are you sure he's right for you? Don't you think this is moving too fast? Why does his family do things that way? Each comment landed softly like concern, but they piled up, night after night, call after call. Slowly, my excitement faded and was replaced by a knot in my stomach I couldn't explain. That's how manipulation works. It makes you doubt your own happiness. My fiancé noticed before I did. He asked why I flinched every time my phone buzzed, why I suddenly needed my mom's approval for decisions I'd already made, why I started apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I told him it was stress, wedding planning, family stuff. I didn't want to admit what it really was, a mother versus child conflict I'd been avoiding my entire life. The closer we got to the wedding, the worse it became. My mom wanted copies of contracts, access to guest lists. She questioned the venue, the menu, the vows. She had opinions about my dress, my future, my finances. She said she was just helping, but her help came with conditions. I didn't realize the trap until it was already closed. The night everything changed, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and said something that made my blood run cold. "If you go through with this wedding," she said calmly, "you will lose me." No shouting, no drama, just certainty. In that moment, I understood how deep the family interference really went. This wasn't about love, it was about control, and I was about to pay the price for choosing my own life. I wish I could tell you I stood up right then. I didn't. What happened next unraveled everything I thought I knew about loyalty, guilt, and how far a parent will go to win a war you never agreed to fight. And that was only the beginning. Before the wedding chaos, my life was quiet in a way I'd worked hard to build. I was 31. I lived on my own, I paid my own bills, I had a job I didn't hate, and a relationship that felt steady, safe, and deeply real. My fiancé, Evan, wasn't flashy. He was consistent, the kind of man who remembered small details and never raised his voice, the kind of love that doesn't burn hot, but warms you every day. That's probably why my mom hated him. She never said it outright. She never called him a bad man. Instead, she used softer weapons: comparison, doubt, fear. That's how family interference works when it's sophisticated. It doesn't attack the person directly. It attacks your confidence in yourself. She'd say things like, "I just worry you're settling," or "You've always been so easy to influence." Sometimes she'd sigh and say, "I just don't recognize you anymore." Every sentence carried the same message: you can't be trusted to choose your own life. Growing up, it was always just the two of us. My dad left early. My mom became everything: parent, authority, emotional anchor. I learned young that keeping her happy meant keeping the peace. I mistook that survival skill for love. So when Evan proposed, I didn't just say yes to him, I braced myself for her reaction. At first, she surprised me. She smiled, hugged me, told everyone she was thrilled. I thought maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe this time would be different. It wasn't. The shift was subtle. She asked to meet Evan one-on-one. Then she wanted weekly updates on the planning. Then she started questioning our finances, our timeline, our future kids. It felt like a slow tightening around my chest. This was no longer just wedding stress. It was full-blown relationship drama carefully hidden behind polite conversations and concerned looks. Evan tried to be patient. He respected my bond with my mother. He never asked me to choose. But I could see the toll it took on him, watching the woman he loved slowly second-guess everything because of a mother versus child conflict predated him by decades. There were nights I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear me, nights I lay awake wondering why happiness felt like betrayal. The closer we got to the wedding, the more my mom framed herself as the victim. "I've sacrificed everything for you. I just want what's best. After all I've done, this is how you repay me?" Those words hit harder than anger ever could. They rewired my guilt. They made me feel selfish for wanting a life that didn't revolve around her. By the time invitations were sent, I was already splitting in two. One version of me planning a future with the man I loved, and another still desperately trying to earn my mom's approval. I told myself I could manage both. I told myself it would settle down after the wedding. I was wrong, because when control starts slipping, it doesn't fade quietly. It escalates. And my mom was just getting started.
The pressure didn't explode all at once. It crept in, quiet, persistent, almost reasonable. That's the scariest kind of family interference, the kind that makes you question whether you're overreacting, whether you're imagining things, whether the problem is actually you. My mom started calling late at night, always after Evan had gone to bed. She'd lower her voice, like she was sharing secrets meant only for me. "I didn't want to say anything before," she'd begin. That sentence alone was enough to make my stomach drop. She hinted that Evan was hiding things, that his family had a reputation, that she'd heard stories, never with names, never with proof, just enough to plant fear. When I pushed back, she'd retreat immediately. "Oh, forget I said anything. I'm probably just paranoid. I just worry because I love you." That's how gaslighting works inside a mother versus child conflict. The accusation disappears, but the doubt stays. I started replaying conversations in my head, looking for signs I'd missed. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. The trust I had in Evan didn't vanish. It eroded, slowly, painfully. Then she moved on to practical things. She told me she'd spoken to a friend who worked in finance. Apparently, combining assets before marriage was risky. She suggested I delay the wedding until everything was reviewed. She framed it as protection, but the timing wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't advice. This was control disguised as concern. I asked Evan if we could go over finances again. He looked hurt, not defensive. He agreed anyway. That made me feel worse. The relationship drama wasn't loud, but it was poisoning us. The real betrayal came when I discovered she was talking to people behind my back. A coworker casually mentioned that my mom had asked her whether I seemed stable lately. Another relative hinted that my mom was worried I was rushing into something. I hadn't authorized any of it. I confronted her gently, carefully, like someone approaching a sleeping animal. She laughed, said I was sensitive, said she was just asking for support because she was scared of losing me. And there it was again, that guilt, that invisible leash. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Admitting the truth meant admitting my own complicity in letting this happen. By then, the wedding was 6 weeks away. My mom asked me to come over alone. No Evan. She said she wanted quality time. I should have said no. That night, she cried harder than I'd ever seen. She talked about her sacrifices, her loneliness, her fear of being abandoned. She told me she didn't sleep anymore, that her health was declining. Then she said something that changed the air in the room. "I don't think I can survive this wedding." It sounded dramatic, but it didn't feel fake. That's when I realized this wasn't just interference. This was emotional warfare, a mother versus child conflict where the battlefield was my conscience. I went home shaking. Evan asked what was wrong. I lied. Because by then, I was already trapped between the life I wanted and the fear of destroying the woman who raised me. And the worst part, I still didn't know how far she was willing to go. 3 weeks before the wedding, my mom asked me to meet her at a cafe near her house. Public place, daytime, calm voice on the phone. She said, "I just want to talk. No pressure." I believed her because part of me needed to believe her. She arrived early, coffee already ordered, papers neatly stacked on the table like she was there for a business meeting, not to dismantle her daughter's life. She didn't waste time. She slid one document toward me and said, "I need you to read this carefully." It was a letter, typed, formal, addressed to me. It listed concerns about my mental health, my impulsivity, my history of emotional dependence. It claimed I was being pressured into marriage and might not be capable of informed consent. My hands started shaking. She told me she'd spoken to a lawyer. She said it gently, like she was talking about the weather. She explained that if I went through with the wedding, she was prepared to take protective steps. Guardianship? Legal intervention? Court? This was family interference in its most terrifying form. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept it. I asked her if she was serious. She nodded. "I'm your mother," she said. "It's my responsibility." In that moment, every quiet doubt I'd ignored crashed into me at once. This wasn't love. This wasn't concern. This was control wrapped in legal language. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped loudly across the floor. People turned to stare, but I didn't care. "You're threatening me," I said. She looked genuinely confused, hurt even. "I'm trying to save you," she replied, "from making a mistake you can't undo." That was the breaking point, the moment the mother versus child conflict crossed a line it could never uncross. I walked out without finishing my coffee, sat in my car, stared at the steering wheel for a long time. My chest felt hollow, like all the air had been sucked out of me. When I got home, Evan was there. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I told him everything. I watched the color drain from his face as I spoke. Not anger, shock, fear, helplessness. He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't demand anything. He just said quietly, "This isn't normal." Hearing it out loud shattered the last piece of denial I had left. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, her certainty, her calm. I realized something terrifying. She truly believed she was right, and people like that don't stop. They escalate. 3 days later, she called again. Her voice was steady. "I need your answer," she said. "Are you canceling the wedding, or do I proceed?" There it was, the ultimatum. Not a conversation, not a discussion, a countdown. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the dress hanging in the closet, and in that moment, crushed between fear and guilt, I made the decision that would break my heart and set everything else in motion. I told her I would cancel.
Canceling the wedding didn't feel like relief. It felt like something inside me went quiet. Not peace, numbness. I called vendors. I emailed guests. I lied through clenched teeth. Family emergency. Bad timing. Please understand. Every message chipped away at me, but I kept my voice steady. I cried only when I was alone. My mom, on the other hand, was suddenly radiant. She told people I'd come to my senses. She said the stress had been too much for me. She thanked friends for supporting her during such a hard time. The family interference she'd orchestrated now wore the mask of triumph. Evan didn't fight me. That hurt almost as much as everything else. He asked for space, not out of anger, out of self-respect. The relationship drama had exhausted him, and I understood why. I let him go because I didn't want to drag him into a war he never signed up for. For weeks, I drifted. I went to work, I smiled when expected, I answered my mom's calls. On the surface, I was compliant again, the good daughter restored. But something had changed. The fear was gone. In its place was clarity. For the first time, I stopped trying to convince her. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped reacting. I listened. I watched. And I documented everything. I saved messages. I wrote down dates. I kept emails. Every contradiction. Every subtle threat disguised as concern. Every moment she framed my life as evidence of her sacrifice. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. This was preparation. Because once you understand a mother versus child conflict like this, you realize one thing. Control only works when you play the role assigned to you. So I stopped playing. I agreed with her, just enough to make her comfortable. I let her believe she'd won. People like her get careless when they think they're in control. She started overreaching. She contacted my workplace out of concern. She spoke to extended family about my fragile state. She tried to manage my finances. Each move crossed lines she didn't realize were being recorded. Meanwhile, I rebuilt quietly. I found a therapist who specialized in enmeshment and emotional manipulation. She helped me put words to what I'd lived with for decades, helped me see that this wasn't protection, it was possession. That understanding was power. I also reached out to a lawyer, not to attack, but to understand my rights, to learn how guardianship actually works, to learn how easily her threats fell apart under scrutiny. They fell apart fast. Everything she'd waved in my face relied on one thing, my silence. And silence was something I no longer owed her. I didn't confront her, not yet. I waited. Because the smartest revenge in situations like this doesn't look like punishment. It looks like letting someone expose themselves, fully, clearly, and without interference. And my mother was doing exactly that, all on her own. Karma didn't arrive loudly. It came in envelopes, phone calls, awkward silences. The first crack appeared when my mom tried to escalate again. She contacted a distant relative who worked in social services, hoping to get advice about my situation. She didn't realize that relative knew me, or that they would call me directly, concerned and confused. I told the truth, calmly, clearly, with receipts, texts, emails, dates, voicemails. The tone of the conversation shifted immediately. Within a week, the narrative she'd been spreading started to unravel. People began asking her questions. Why was she so involved in my finances? Why was she contacting my workplace? Why did she seem to know so much about my therapy? This is the thing about family interference. It depends on secrecy. Once light touches it, it loses power. Then came the legal reality check. The lawyer I'd spoken to sent a formal letter, polite, factual, and devastating. It outlined boundaries. It clarified that any attempt at guardianship would require evidence she did not have. It warned that continued interference could be interpreted as harassment. No accusations, no threats, just truth. She received it on a Tuesday morning. She called me that night, furious but shaken. "You're trying to ruin me," she said. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. "I'm protecting myself," I replied. That sentence ended years of mother versus child conflict in one breath. After that, things changed quickly. Family members stopped calling me to check in. They started checking in on her.
Her story no longer matched reality, and people noticed. The concern she'd cultivated turned into quiet distance. At the same time, Evan reached out. He'd been watching from afar. He told me he saw the difference, the steadiness, the boundaries, the absence of fear. We talked, not about getting back together, but about healing, about the relationship drama that had nearly destroyed us. There were no promises, just honesty. For the first time in a long while, my life felt like it belonged to me again. My mom didn't apologize. She never admitted wrongdoing, but she stopped. The calls became shorter, the demands faded, the control loosened, not because she suddenly understood, but because she had no leverage left. That was the karma. Not humiliation, not revenge fantasies, just the slow collapse of a system that relied on my compliance. I didn't need to punish her. She punished herself by revealing who she really was to everyone else. And I was finally free to step out of the shadow of a mother versus child conflict that had defined my entire life. But freedom comes with grief, because winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like the end of an illusion you spent years believing in. And that's when the real healing begins. Part 6, Karma Strikes, Payoff. Karma didn't show up the way movies promise. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match, no public collapse. Instead, karma arrived slowly, quietly, through consequences my mother never thought she'd face. It started when she pushed too far. She contacted a distant relative who worked in social services, framing everything as a worried mother trying to save her unstable daughter. She expected sympathy, validation, backup. What she didn't expect was that relative calling me directly. Her voice was careful, professional. She asked gentle questions. I answered calmly. Then I sent documentation, screenshots, dates, voicemails. Not emotionally, not defensively, just facts. That was the moment the family interference lost its power. Because interference only works in the dark. Within days, the tone around my mom shifted. Relatives who once repeated her worries now asked her to explain herself. Why had she contacted my employer? Why was she managing my finances without consent? Why was she threatening legal action? Her story cracked under pressure. Then came the letter. At my lawyer's recommendation, a formal notice was sent. It didn't accuse, it didn't insult, it simply outlined boundaries and clarified that further interference could be considered harassment. It also explained clearly that her guardianship threats had no legal standing. The letter landed on her doorstep on a Tuesday morning. She called me that night, furious but shaken. "You're trying to ruin me," she said. For years, I would have apologized. I would have explained. I would have folded under the weight of guilt. This time, I didn't. "I'm protecting myself," I said quietly. That sentence ended years of mother versus child conflict in one breath. After that, things changed quickly. Family members stopped calling me to check in. They started checking in on her. Her story no longer matched reality, and people noticed. The concern she'd cultivated turned into quiet distance. At the same time, Evan reached out. He'd been watching from afar. He told me he saw the difference, the steadiness, the boundaries, the absence of fear. We talked, not about getting back together, but about healing, about the relationship drama that had nearly destroyed us. There were no promises, just honesty. For the first time in a long while, my life felt like it belonged to me again. My mom didn't apologize. She never admitted wrongdoing, but she stopped. The calls became shorter, the demands faded, the control loosened, not because she suddenly understood, but because she had no leverage left. That was the karma. Not vengeance, not cruelty, just consequences. She lost the narrative, she lost the control, and she lost the version of me who would sacrifice everything to keep her comfortable. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of her. I felt free. But freedom comes with grief.
because letting go of control also means letting go of the illusion of the parent you wished you'd had, and that realization was both heartbreaking and necessary.
In the quiet after everything fell apart, I expected relief to rush in. It didn't. What came instead was grief, slow, heavy, and confusing. I wasn't just mourning a canceled wedding or a broken relationship. I was mourning the version of my mother I had believed in my entire life, the one who loved without conditions, the one who wanted my happiness more than my obedience. Letting go of that illusion hurt more than the family interference ever did. For months, I replayed memories differently. Conversations I once labeled as care revealed themselves as control. Moments I thought were love now felt transactional. That realization didn't make me angry, it made me sad. Therapy became less about survival and more about rebuilding. I learned that mother versus child conflict doesn't always look like abuse. Sometimes it looks like devotion with strings attached. Sometimes it looks like a parent who cannot separate their identity from their child's life. I also learned something uncomfortable about myself. I wasn't weak. I was conditioned. Conditioned to prioritize peace over truth. Conditioned to accept guilt as love. Conditioned to mistake compliance for maturity. Understanding that changed how I saw every relationship drama I'd ever tolerated, not just with my mother, but with friends, partners, even coworkers. Evan and I never got back together. That used to feel like another loss. Over time, it felt like closure. We met once, months later, for coffee. There was warmth, respect, no bitterness. Just two people acknowledging that love sometimes isn't enough when outside forces are constantly pulling it apart. He told me something I still carry with me. "You didn't lose me because of your mom," he said. "You lost yourself for a while, and now you're finding her again." He was right. I started making decisions without asking permission. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. I moved apartments. I took a job opportunity I would have once run by my mother first. I built friendships that felt balanced, not obligation-driven. My relationship with my mom exists now, but it's limited, boundaried, civil. She still tries sometimes. Old habits die hard. But when the family interference begins to surface, I don't argue, I don't defend, I end the conversation. And that, more than anything, has taught me peace. The biggest lesson wasn't about revenge or karma, it was about ownership. Your life doesn't belong to the person who raised you. Your happiness isn't a debt you owe anyone, and love that demands self-erasure is not love, it's control. If you're caught in a mother versus child conflict that feels impossible to name, know this: clarity will come. Slowly, painfully, but it will come. And when it does, you won't feel triumphant. You'll feel free. And freedom, I've learned, is worth every uncomfortable truth it takes to get there. It's strange how life keeps moving forward after something you thought was permanent disappears. There was no dramatic new beginning moment, no clean reset, just ordinary days that slowly felt lighter, quieter, more like mine. Sometimes people still ask about the wedding. I tell them it was canceled. I don't explain why. Not because I'm ashamed, but because the story belongs to me now. I no longer feel the need to justify my choices or defend my boundaries. That might be the biggest change of all. The family interference didn't end my life, it revealed it. It showed me how deeply fear can disguise itself as love, how easily guilt can masquerade as responsibility, and how dangerous it is when a mother versus child conflict goes unnamed for too long. I don't hate my mother. That surprises people when they hear my story. Hatred would mean she still had power over my emotions. She doesn't. What I feel now is distance, clarity, and a quiet sadness for what could have been if control hadn't mattered more than connection. As for love, I still believe in it. I believe in relationships built on choice, not obligation, on respect, not fear. I believe that relationship drama doesn't have to mean chaos, that sometimes it's simply a sign that boundaries were never allowed to exist. If you're listening to this and feeling uncomfortable, I want you to sit with that feeling for a moment. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself who benefits when you stay silent, who gains when you shrink, who calls it love when it costs your voice. I used to think strength meant enduring anything for the people who raised you. Now I know strength sometimes means disappointing them. Sometimes it means walking away from expectations that were never fair to begin with. Sometimes it means choosing a future that scares you, because staying where you are scares you even more. I don't know what my life will look like 5 years from now, but I know this: it will be my life, and that certainty is something no one can take from me again. So I'll leave you with this: no advice, no judgment, just a question. If the people who claim to love you asked you to give up your future to keep them comfortable, what would you do? I'd really like to know.